Hi, and welcome to another episode of Chile, where we're going to keep visiting this amazing country. But today we're leaving the capital for taking a day trip into two cities that are often visited together because they're very, very close to Santiago. And even though they are both going to be very close to Santiago and from each other, they're going to be very different. So they are a very complimentary visit that for sure you should include in your itinerary. These two cities will be Viña del Mar and Valparaiso. These cities are both located over an hour and a half from the capital, crossing a beautiful landscape of hills, vineyards, and mountains. When I went, I took a day tour from Santiago. And the truth is that this will be the most convenient way to visit both cities because they're going to be quite small. So, on the same day, I think you can manage to see the most important things of both and fully enjoy each one of the cities. You could also decide to do this trip by car on your own, but what the locals told me is that Valparaiso is not going to be very safe to visit by yourself. So, especially if you're a solo traveler or if you're a female solo traveler, I wouldn't risk it. But if you have a big group, it might be cheaper to rent a car and do this tour by yourself instead of taking a tour. Either way, whenever you go, you should leave early because these cities are going to be closed, but you don't want to waste any time. So if you take a tour or if you do it by yourself, you'll probably have to wake up early in the morning to go visit. And my first recommendation is going to be that even if you're sleepy because you woke up early, try to see the landscape while you're going to the cities and don't fall asleep because you're going to pass through a super beautiful valley that's called the Casablanca Valley. And one of the most important wine regions in the entire country is in this valley, with vineyards on both sides of the road. If you decide to go on your own and you have time, you could even make a stop, visit vineyards, and even if it's early in the morning, you could even taste a little bit, especially Sauvignon Blanc on Chardonnay, or you could also stop when you're on your way back. Since I was taking a guided tour, I didn't have this flexibility, so I couldn't stop. But this would be one thing that maybe you could add either when you're going into the cities or returning. But what I did was my tour picked me straight from Santiago into Valparaiso, or I'm also going to call it how the locals call it, Valpo. Valpo was the main port of the Pacific during the 19th century, and at that time, it became a very cosmopolitan city and even one of the most important in South America. Before the Panama Canal was built, all of the ships that were traveling between Europe, America, and Asia basically had to go around all of South America, passing through the Strait of Magallanes and Cape Horn. And this, as you can imagine, was a very, very long journey. So, all of the boats and ships were looking for a port to resupply, drop off merchandising, etc. And in that context, Valparaiso became the main port of call on the entire South Pacific coast. For its time, it was enormously active commercially. Valparaiso not only received merchant ships from all over the world, but it was also the main point of exchange of goods for the entire Pacific coast. Peru, Ecuador, and even California in the United States largely depended on Valparaiso for all of their international trade. So now you can see the huge importance of Valparaiso. Although in physical terms the port was not as large as those that we know today, its maritime traffic and its economic importance were comparable to the main ports at that time. And this led the city to grow a lot, and it also attracted a lot of European foreigners. But everything happened until 1914, because in this year, you guessed it, the Panama Canal was opened. Obviously, this was much more convenient than going to go around all of America, and so all of this diverted the maritime traffic, leading Valparaiso into a stage of decline. The curious thing is that this decline was what had saved the country and kind of preserved it in a time bubble from the uncontrolled modernism that the rest of the country went through. Because many of the original mansions from like Italians or Europeans are still well preserved. The streets remain as they were in cobblestones. And over the years, this has become like a cultural, artistic, and tourist center that's full of history and color. If you visit today, this is what we call a museum city, which means that just by walking through its streets, you can already see and be amazed by a lot of impressive street art. And on top of that, the old buildings and the constructions will also add into the beauty of this city. So, as I like to call it, it will be like an open air museum. Valparaiso was built on top of 43 hills, and that means that each street will have its own view. From the moment you arrive, the first thing you will notice is that everything will be inclined, kind of like San Francisco, and everything's going to have stairs, slopes, or old elevators. And that's why, to start your tour, I recommend that you look to one of the viewpoints. From many of them, you can see the bay and the sea, along with the colorful roofs that will cover the hills. But the one I visited with my tour was called Paseo Yugoslavo, which you can reach by climbing up Cerro Alegre, where the view is simply spectacular. It's funny because many people believe that the name Cerro Alegre, which translates to Happy Hill, is because of the colors of this neighborhood. And as you're going up the hill, you would see that there are many, many colors and like street art in this neighborhood. But the name Happy Hill doesn't come from this, but it comes because this was Valparaiso's red district. And so, since it was an area that was full of brothels, it became a happy hill for locals, and that's where the name appeared, Cerro Alegre. After getting into this viewpoint and taking many photos of the views, we went to Cerro Concepcion, one of Valpo's most touristy and bohemian hills, where you'll find the famous Paseo Atkinson, which is a very long balcony overlooking the port with incredible views. This entire neighborhood is going to be full of colorful houses, murals, art galleries, charming cafes, and handicraft shops. So it's impossible not to take out your camera on like every corner. If you go with a guide, it's going to be kind of like a graffiti tour because he or she will help you better understand all of the street art that you'll see. But for me, when I was looking at everything, I became obsessed with four artists. The first and my personal favorite is going to be called the Varus McKinsey. And this is an artist who paints everything in black and white. And while I'm talking about this artist, I'm going to be sharing some of the photos that I took while I was in Valparaiso. But so this guy is very particular, and you can recognize his style quite easily because, as I was saying, everything will be black and white and it will have a lot of detail in it. I really loved all of his murals, and it became one of my favorite artists when I visited Valparaiso. My second favorite is one that's called Cuelli Mangi, who paints with a very particular technique that consists of making a figure composed of other smaller figures. So, for example, this whale, which he made by combining other sea animals. This is his hallmark, and the works that he does are going to be a combination of several figures that will form the shape of something else, which makes it also very fun and entertaining to see. The third artist that I like, it's called Newenki, and he's going to paint very particular figures that will replicate the Mapuche indigenous people. So these ones are also going to be very easy to recognize, and he has many different variations of this figure, so it's nice spotting them around and looking at the stripes red and white. It's almost like finding Waldo, but now with Mapuche indigenous people. And my last favorite artist is going to be one that's called La Loica, and he is going to paint extremely elaborate things. And my favorite mural by him is the one that's on the facade of Hotel Manoir Atkinson. This mural is going to represent everything important about Valparaiso. It has a boat representing, of course, all of the port and the maritime importance of the city, and also the fishing because Valparaiso was a fishing city. It will also have the steep streets, the colorful houses, which are typical of Valpo. It will have a dog that's a particular Chilean breed, and it also has a couple that are dancing the Chilean national dance, which is called La Cueca. Also in this mural, you will be able to see a funicular, which is a classic element of Valparaiso. These elevators were built between the late 19th century and the early 20th century, and although many have stopped working because they're so old, several are still operating, such as Ascensor El Peral or Reina Victoria. They're going to be an experience in themselves because they're noisy, they're old, they're slow, but they're very authentic. And of course, they're one of the most popular and typical postcards from the city. After walking through this entire area, my tour just went on to Viña del Mar. But if you have extra time to dedicate to Valparaiso, or if your tour includes it, you should try going to Cerro Florida, which is where La Sebastiana is located, and La Sebastiana is one of Pablo Neruda's house museums. Although I didn't go this time, the place itself is definitely worth visiting for the history and for the views. Neruda was saying that this house looked like a ship anchored on a hill, and seeing it from the outside, it's easy to understand why. Pablo Neruda, as I've been explaining in some of my previous episodes, is one of the most important Chilean poets. He is a Nobel Prize in Literature, and I imagine that visiting this house should be a very interesting visit. One fun fact about it is that the real name of Pablo Neruda wasn't Pablo Neruda. This was a literary pseudonym that the poet adopted when he was 16. His real name was Ricardo Eliezer Neftali Reyes Basualto, and then he chose to call himself Pablo Neruda. My guide said that this was an acronym, but this is not confirmed. But what we do know is that it was his way of publishing without his family, especially his father, finding out that he wrote poetry, because the family did not support him in that path. Neruda not only wrote poetry, he also designed poetic spaces, such as the one in this house. And he decorated all of his houses as if they were ships on dry land. So they had low doors to stoop, they had narrow corridors like cabins, he had collections of figureheads, bottles, maps, seashells, rudders, and even a bell that he used to ring for calling the mules, as if he was the captain of his own imaginary ship. In any case, I think it's going to be an experience that will be definitely worth it if you have enough time. So if you manage to go, tell me in the comments what you thought. And after you finish that, then you should move on into Viña del Mar, which is the neighboring city and the one that I also visited. And Viña, as you'll see, is going to be completely different because if Valpo is going to be street art, history, bohemian things, and poetry, Viña is going to be order, gardens, beach, and summer vacation. This was planned as a garden city, and that's one of the reasons why this city has very wide streets, well maintained parks, and many, many flowers. This is going to be the city where many Santiaguinos will spend their vacations, and also the place where the famous Viña del Mar International Song Festival is going to be held. When I went, my first stop was the Casino de Juegos, which is one of the city's most iconic buildings, and it was inaugurated in 1930. This place is surrounded by palm trees, fountains, and colorful gardens, and it's going to be located right in front of the beach. Another important attraction is the Flower Clock, which was a Swift's gift in 1962 for the celebration of the Soccer World Cup that was held in Chile that year. Its unique design and privileged location facing the sea makes it a top attraction in Viña del Mar. It also has a lot of cultural significance because it represents the natural beauty but also the ability to welcome visitors from all over the world. One fun fact about it is that they're constantly renewing all of the flowers that are part of its design. So, even if you visit this thing twice, you might see different flowers and you might see a different design, which reflects on this city's dynamism and also freshness. It has a very strategic location because it's also near the beach and near the city center, so it's a good starting point for exploring other tourist attractions. And there's a local belief that whoever takes a photograph on this place is going to have a guaranteed return to the city. So either way, you should stop on this clock and take a selfie or take a photo. Afterwards, you can then explore some of the main coastal avenues, such as Avenida Peru, which is going to be ideal for walking along the sea. And over here, you'll see sculptures, also waves that are breaking against the rocks, and many Santiaguinos that may be cycling over here. And from there, you can continue to the Quinta Vergara, which is where the Palacio Vergara Museum is located, and even more importantly, the big amphitheater where the enormous Viña del Mar festival is held. This amphitheater has the capacity for 15,000 people, and it's a festival that has been held annually since 1960. So if you haven't heard about it, it's basically like a Coachella but for South America. And normally this festival is going to be in February. It will last for 6 nights, and it's usually the stage for very, very famous artists like Shakira, but also new artists. And besides, there are going to be competitions that will make it fun. So there's like an international competition that has representatives from different countries that sing their original songs. Or you'll also find a folkloric competition that's focused on traditional music from each country. And then the winners are going to receive a statue of La Gaviota, which is the symbol of the festival. But this is the most representative thing of the entire city, so it's definitely something that you should visit. And well, at the end of the day, we just visited Reñaca, which is one of the most well-known beaches in this entire area. The road will take you through the modern residential neighborhoods that are very pretty and have contemporary architecture and sea views, but Reñaca will be a very large beach that's divided into sectors. So it's ideal either for sunbathing or for walking on the sand. And of course, you can also swim, but be prepared because the Pacific water is very cold, especially for me since I'm used to the Caribbean waters. So I wasn't ready to dive in. If you want to swim, be aware that it might be a little bit cold even during the summer. But with that, I finished all of my tour from Valparaiso and Viña del Mar. Two completely distinct but complementary cities. One is colorful, chaotic, and poetic. The other will be elegant, orderly, and summery. The best part is that both of them are very close to each other, so you can experience both of them in a single day and everything while still staying in Santiago. Tell me in the comments what you like the most about this episode and share it with someone else who loves to travel. If you can, also please give me a review because this will help me tremendously and will motivate me to give you more travel tips. And make sure to subscribe because next week we're going to travel even more south to start our trip to the Chilean Patagonia. Enjoy your trip!